Excellence is interesting. I know you'd asked me this question earlier. I kind of look at it kind of three lenses. One, and just kind of core values that I've lived my life by. One is the ability to listen well. That's number one. Number two is the ability to connect with people by showing empathy. And the third is empowering others to optimize their strength. And, these are kind of three things, not only with my family, in business, whether it's employees, core customers. Um, that's how I define excellence.
Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for hitting the subscribe button. We are nearing the end of our season, and we've got a great one today. From a one-man shop to a 10,000-person empire, the monk who kept his Ferraris, perhaps the most humble and loving person I know. We've got Sashir Ready, fresh out of selling his business, and he's going to talk about how you can find a billion-dollar opportunity. He's going to talk about taking the chance to say yes to everything, which helped him find a path to greatness. And make sure you listen to the end, where he will talk about how to cash out and give up your baby. Welcome to the show, and welcome to the Edge of Excellence. Sashir Ready. After all these months of trying to get you scheduled, you've been living your values, living your best life, working in philanthropy, traveling around with your, should we say perfect wife and children. Thank you so much for, after so much time and so much effort, making the show. Thank you for coming on the Edge of Excellence.
For you, Matt, anything.
Well, I don't know about that, because we were supposed to
Took a
record
little
this
while. I
November, January, February, March, April. And now in May, we finally get it done, and it's going to be a wonderful show. We are going to get into what it means to found a company with one employee and grow it to 10,000 employees worldwide. We're going to get into 18 years of building a business and finding global delivery centers in India, and why you would make the decision to move some of your business to India, some of your business to Philippines. We're going to get into selling. And as our friend Jojon says, start it, build it, make a mint. We won't get into the details of the mint, but there may be a Ferrari SUV in your future. Sashir, before we get into that, I got to ask you the same question I ask everybody. What is your definition of excellence? Is it one word, Vidya?
Oh, yes, of course. Excellence is interesting. I know you'd asked me this question earlier. I kind of look at it kind of three lenses. One, and just kind of core values that I've lived my life by. One is the ability to listen well. That's number one. Number two is the ability to connect with people by showing empathy. And the third is empowering others to optimize their strength. And, these are kind of three things, not only with my family, in business, whether it's employees, core customers. That's how I define excellence.
Yeah. So you did a video for me, and I appreciate you sending it over to toast one of our buddies. And I'll never forget, in Germany, when I came to you and I said, what the hell's going on here? Why is everybody so into Bill? And you said, he's the nicest guy in Orange County. And I said, I thought I was the nicest guy in Orange County. And you said, he's even nicer than you. And in your video, you thought you were the nicest guy in Orange County too, which is, I think about it, you might be even nicer than me. Probably not.
I thought it was.
You might be ranked higher than me on the nicest scale. But as far as humility goes, 100% certain you're way higher than me on the humility score. How does humility fit? I mean, and I think in your video you did for our friend Bill, I think you mentioned his humility, and he's a pretty humble guy, but man, you might even be more humble than him. How does your core value of excellence, your excellence focused on core values, listening well, connecting through empathy. So maybe humility comes in there, empowering others. Maybe there's humility there too, where you're not thinking you're the best at everything like some of us do. Where does humility fit into your definition of excellence?
I just don't make it about me, right? I think that's when you start building a big ego, and it just becomes about yourself, right? And for me, I I've always feel I'm better when I'm helping others, right? Helping others. I The question about empowering others, right? I could see them with employees, like, you set a vision, but then you hire good people and you trust, right? You trust other people to execute on the vision. Like I said, I think humility comes with just removing your ego, right? And focusing on others and making sure others are doing well. And I think that's where it comes from. I think it comes from a bit of a cultural thing. I think, as you know, just growing up in an Indian family, my parents have always taught me that. Don't focus on yourself, focus on others, and focus on helping others. And we'll talk about it a little bit later. Just growing up, there was a part of my life where I grew up in India as well. I went to middle school out there, and I think just living in India, just learning about the culture there and the environment there, I just came to appreciate everything I was given, right? The opportunities, great family, great friends, and so always came to focus on outside, not myself, right? And I think once you remove the ego, that's where humility comes in. And I see people like Bill, right?
I'm completely baffled for a second here, because a lot of my experience with and in India is with a certain group of people that, I mean, it's the Bollywood movie stars. And, my dear, dear brother from another mother, who I'm not even going to say his name right now, because I'm just going to say humility. I didn't know that was a cultural element of India. And I will say that my friend is a wonderful, loving person. And my friend, and you know him, listens well, connects through empathy, is empowering, has taught me a whole lot. But the inside of the first GQ is 8 pages on him. He spends a lot of money on stuff. I mean, I'd say he's more on my end of the scale of humility than your end of the scale of humility. So is it a cultural thing in India to be humble? And this guy and I just missed it.
I don't want to stereotype people in India, but it depends on the region you're part of in India. So we come from the South, and traditionally South India, people a little bit more on the conservative, a little bit more on the quiet side, and a lot of the things I described around connecting through empathy, I think humility, I think that sort of is just the characteristic of people who grew up in the South, right?
And the Dalai Lama lives in the Punjab region, doesn't he?
Now, which is the north.
Which is the north,
north India.
And so I guess every country has its mixtures, and I don't know that we would say that the United States is a very humble land, but there are quite a few people of humility. I got to spend some more time in India. Well, we're going to get into India. We're going to get into some time in India. And we're going to get, before we get into what is AI-driven analytics and, Episource, and how do you sell your business to the largest healthcare company in the world? And how do you transition after that? I mean, you gave up your baby, and it was a year ago, right?
Yeah, exactly a year ago.
So I know you've done a lot of traveling, because you seem to be getting around. We'll get into the transition, but I do want to just visit life, and maybe we'll spend a little time on India. You started in the United States, went to India, and came back, right?
Yes.
So you kind of went there for boarding school, didn't you?
No, so I was born in New Jersey. Dad was a doctor, went to med school in India, came out to the US in 1974, did his residency out in New Jersey. I was born in New Jersey. 3 years later, he gets a job out here in Claremont, Southern California, moves out here. I went to school here till the 3rd grade. I was 9 years old. And then he decides, hey, we're going to move you, your sisters, your mom, we're all moving to India. And the idea there is to get close to our grandparents, our cousins, learn about Indian culture. You guys are going to go to school there. So we moved to India. So I was in India from the fourth grade to the ninth grade. I was there till I was 15 years old and came back when I was a sophomore in high school, which was an interesting transition.
You spent freshman year in India too. So
yeah,
that's an interesting time to transition.
Yeah. So it was hard. It was hard. You're obviously 6 years and you're in a different country. And it's not like you're coming back here in high school. And high school is a big transition for a lot of people, right? So
coming in as a freshman is hard enough, let alone as a sophomore.
Exactly. So that was a pretty hard transition, but yeah, that period in India was special, really special, because not only getting close to family, being in school there was just an amazing experience. I'm still very close to a lot of my classmates at the time. I was able to build a lot of friendships, and actually just being there, even after we came back, we always wanted to go back. So we always made it a point every summer to go back and visit, spend time with our grandparents, family, and friends. And I think we'll talk about it later, but I think that experience gave me the sort of the confidence to actually go to India and set up a business. Otherwise, I don't think if I had that experience and having the ability of spending time with people there, understanding the language, the culture, it would have been hard for me to do anything in India.
I guarantee, had you not gone to India, you would have been just fine and gone back there, and your path would have ended up the same, guarantee. However, did you meet Vidya while you were there?
Yeah, so not when I was in school there. So fast forward after, do we want to talk about that?
No. So you did not meet Vidya in this third grade to 10th grade. And just interesting, because the values that illustrates, being close to family, and family first. I mean, that's how you live your life. And maybe I'll throw myself in your kind of greater circle of family, because you treat your friends that way too. The cultural experience, the international experience, what a valuable way to spend time, and how scary. And when you left, you were in New Jersey. When you came back, did you go to New Jersey again?
No. So I have no connection to New Jersey other than just being born there.
You came to California, right?
Yeah.
And you went to high school where in California?
That was Claremont High School. So Claremont, I've been like
high school, college, and grad school.
Everything Claremont, yeah.
Whoa.
It was a little too much in Claremont. I know. I kind of look back. I kind of wish I went to, kind of branched out, maybe left California. But Claremont colleges are great schools. Had a great experience there. So
wow,
it was a lot of Claremont.
So wait a second. So you have lived within 20, 30 miles of where you currently live right now since you were 15 years old.
Yeah.
How crazy is that? You start off in New Jersey, you go all the way to India, get this whole worldly experience. You then move to the exact same place for high school, college, grad school, starting a business, growing the business. And you've been living in that Tustin house I went to for a long time, right?
Irvine, yeah. Well, Irvine, I've been in Irvine for 15 years. And before that, when I married Vidya, we were in Marina Del Rey for a few years before we had our first kid. But yeah, it's pretty much kind of in the same area.
At least you made it to LA for a little bit. And now you're right up the street. I'm right. I can see the PCH right here. You're right up the street, living next door to Chris and Heather Marsh. Awesome people that you didn't even know.
Also, they're people,
You didn't even know. Now you have a house next to them, which I'm so jealous of. Well, that's very interesting. So you go off to India, you got close to your family, you get the school experience, you get this international experience. What's the take? And if you're not a big traveler and you're listening to the show right now, put India on your list. And India is so shockingly different than anything you can even contemplate. You go to certain places like London, where my family's from London. There's a lot of similarities. You go down to Mexico, and Mexico's kind of turned into America South. Costa Rica is going to be a little different, but even it's become more similar to the United States because of so many people from the United States. India is a totally different culture. It's not the Western culture. Lots of Asia are totally different. So what was the beauty? What was the best part the thing that changed you the most, and put it in terms of some kid listening right now that maybe grew up in a different part of America. What did it give you that really came in handy later in life to propel you the way you've been propelled?
I mean, you see in India is, I call it kind of sensory overload, right? There's just so much of everything over there, right? But I think one thing, and when I was there, I was very young, right? I was 9 years old, lived there for 6 years in those early years. At that time, India was not, I would say India's become very global and fairly westernized in its
But it
own way,
wasn't
right?
then.
It wasn't back then, right? So
It
for
wasn't
me,
even
when I
global, and like it was becoming global at the turn of this century, right? Even in the 90s, it was still, I mean, when did India become independent? 1948, 49?
1948, so yeah, yeah.
48, yeah. Wow. You think about that. It went from 1948 till 2008. And I met the guy that built the concrete part of the infrastructure. I went to his house, and he had spent $73 million on the yard. Hadn't even built the house yet. And there was a house near your new house that was for sale for 73 million in the US. That was the most expensive house in the US. This guy made that much money from concrete infrastructure. There was no infrastructure in India, and from 48 till 2018. Really, they took these cities and these towns and these roads and did what they did in the US over 300 years. They did it there in 50, 60 years. And now it's just this global metropolis and hub of the world. And the population's been growing too. So sorry to interrupt. Keep going. I love India though. So you're just throwing me off on
I know you
tangents.
do. Yeah. India at the time, it's interesting. At that time, you would think, okay, my dad was a doctor. He actually gave up his practice here, which was starting to thrive here, to start over from scratch again. So he's
For
building up
family
his practice in
values.
India. Yeah, exactly. So he
Wow.
sacrificed a lot for us. But it's easy to say, hey, I was going to a good private school in India. We are living in nice houses, nice neighborhoods. But what I really came to appreciate through the school experience, even my dad's family. So my dad's father, my grandparents came from the village areas. So they came from a very rural part of another state called Andhra Pradesh in India. So we would actually in the summers go spend a month and a half in the tiniest of villages in India, right? So, and that was a great experience because you're not just getting kind of exposure to kind of a sheltered city life and city experience. You're actually experiencing the country as a whole, right? So you're actually going to a very remote area where it's farming, tiny villages, poor infrastructure. I mean, we would spend summers in the family house. It'd have no power for most of the day, right? And if the generator works, the generator works. It doesn't, you're kind of up in the terrace and you're kind of sleeping under the stars, right? So I just stuff like that came to experience all aspects of the experience in India. And, whether you're in a big, busy city or in a rural village, I could see people are generally happy. It's hard sometimes there in India, but I think they're happy in their own way. And that always brought a smile to my face, right?
That is my first takeaway from India is the smiles on the people's faces. The little girl, I have a picture of this little girl, 3 years old, begging in the street, and the smile and the concept of kismet. And by the way, I just read Viken's sister Eileen's book on the Armenian genocide. I did not realize the Armenians have the concept of kismet as well. Uh,
Oh, really? Okay. I
and,
didn't know
and
that. Yeah.
yeah, and theirs is more exactly kind of fate, but the hand of God may come down and touch you at any moment and change the direction of your life. Is the Indian version of kismet, as I understand it. Did I get it almost right?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and so and
Yes.
so there's this faith in what's possible and this happiness that isn't tied to material wealth and isn't tied to ease of life. It is such an absolute beautiful thing. So that's where you're getting your confidence from, your problem solving abilities, your grounding, your humility. It
And
really, go ahead.
yeah, and I would say for anyone that's looking to have a travel experience, go international, I think given what I would share is given my experience, try to experience the country in full, right? It's not just about, hey, I'm going to go to a big city, go and have fun in like the big parts of town and maybe do this typical tourist stuff. Like, how do you really immerse yourself in the country, right? And I was like put in a great situation where I could experience all those things. But if anyone has an opportunity to do that, I would highly encourage it, right? Just getting very immersed in all aspects of a country, right? And I got that experience.
You've just changed my trip to Japan that I'm trying to plan. So you come back to the US, you're at Claremont High School. You must have got good grades to get into Claremont College.
Yep, yep.
And it
Worked hard. Yeah.
was it Claremont College that you went to?
Claremont McKenna. Yeah. So the Claremont
Claremont
College is
McKenna.
in 5 colleges. Yeah.
Yeah, Claremont McKenna. And then which of the Claremont schools did you go to for your master's in information systems?
So it was Claremont Graduate School. So there's one graduate school over there at Claremont. So there's 4 undergraduate schools and 1 graduate school.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the Ivy Leagues of California. It's these smaller liberal arts schools that are very prestigious. So you had to crush it in high school. And I'm sure go ahead.
I actually wanted to stay in California. I love California. I got into UCLA, got into Berkeley. I thought I was going to go on that path. You know, coming from family of an Indian family of doctors, my dad being a doctor, the expectation is you are going to be a doctor or you're going to be an engineer. There's nothing else you're going to do, right? And that's the only way you're going to be successful. And I kind of like got caught up in that. And in college, I was pre-med. I was a chemistry major. And I think by the time I was in a junior year, well, going back to UCLA, why I chose Claremont McKenna, I had a friend who was also in Claremont High School, ended up going to Claremont McKenna. And he said, listen, the class sizes, you got 25, 30 students in a class. UCLA, Berkeley, you're going to be a class of 300 people, right? Or 400 people. I don't know how many students now in a class, but back then they were big. So the attention you get from professors and just the interactions you have with the other students, like this is a great experience too. And so I kind of went in with that. Otherwise I think I would have been at UCLA or Berkeley.
And who paid for your college?
My dad.
Oh, stick it to him after he takes you to India, gives up his medical practice, does all this stuff for the family. Like, hey, Dad, I'm going to skip that half price, equally as prestigious university, UCLA and Berkeley, and you're going to pay double, but you got to stay home, which is awesome. You better be taking care of mom and dad now there, Sishir. You better be taking them on some of those trips. I hope he might get one of those badass Ferrari SUVs. So obviously you kicked ass in high school because you just don't get into those schools if you don't. Obviously you're well-rounded. Obviously the values. I mean, everybody that knows you thinks that you're one of the most wonderful. I guess wonderful would be the word. There's so many adjectives we could go with, but both you and your wife, just such beautiful, wonderful people. So obviously that's going on. When you're in college, though, you're taking pre-med. And it's interesting, your business ended up doing medical records, right? So what happened to the doctoring? How could you let the entire family down this way, Sashir?
One thing I look back, I kind of knew in my heart I did not want to go to med school. I knew I did not want to after graduating, spend another 4 years in med school, spend another 3+ years in residency. It just seemed like a long path to become a doctor. And during that time, even though my dad had expectations of me being a doctor, in my junior year, he did say, listen, if your heart's not in it, I don't want to force you to become a doctor because you need passion, you need to care to be happy and successful in that profession. And if your heart's not in it, maybe pivot and find something else, right? And so I think at that moment, I realized I needed to find something different, right? So
let's just pause there for a second. Someone listening to this podcast right now on 1.5 speed, because I always recommend they do, because I talk too much and we need to speed me up. They're listening, they're thinking, how do I know if my heart's not in it? How do I know if I'm passionate about what I chose? How did you? I think it's easier to see that your heart is in it than it is to see that your heart isn't. How did you find that out?
Yeah, I think there was always this back of me where my experience in India, having that global sort of outlook on life, always drew me to doing something more in global in scope. Whether it's business or export import trade, something to do with sort of anything internationally, right? And that was sort of drawing me there. And I knew being a doctor here, practicing the US, was probably not something that's going to get me excited, only for that reason, right? It was something that having more of that international global outlook was kind of drawing me in that direction. And I spent, finishing up my chemistry degree and told myself, hey, I'm going to take a year off. I want to figure out where this is going to take me.
Oh no!
And
Oh no! That's what we always say not to do.
I know my parents were not happy with it, but it's interesting. My parents, as I would say they're not super conservative, but I think the expectation is like, hey, we want to make sure that you're treading in the right direction. You're, I guess, moving in a safe. You're following a safe path, right? Something where you're going to be financially secure, and so we don't have to take care of you anymore, right? It's kind of like that thing.
Oh my
Um,
God, Sishir. My son better listen to this one because I am such a, this right here. Here's my notes from my last podcast I just recorded. You can't see it because I'm blurring my background. How you launch at 21 and 22 makes all the difference. Invest in yourself immediately out of college. That's the first thing that's in the intro reel for Dart and Case, who I recorded right before you. I believe that I sometimes parent out of fear, and I think parents parent out of fear. I've got so much fear for my poor son who's taking 30 units this semester to graduate, 24 last semester, hasn't found a job yet. All he wanted to do is have what did he call it? A senior summer. I'm like, there's no such thing as a senior summer, dude. Yeah, that's when you go have a good time. Like, no, that doesn't exist. Dad, I went to high school. I graduated from high school in COVID, and now I'm graduating and I want a senior summer. And I'm like, dude, if you don't have a job within 15 minutes of getting out of school, you're going to fail in life. And that's why I like doing this podcast, because it's not my opinion, it's everybody else's opinion. So you needed a year to find yourself. So my son doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, I did. And
don't say me, don't say me, don't say me. Who paid for your year? Not dad, please.
of course they did. Of course they did.
Oh no. And did your mom tell me Jill's not going to have to talk me into this? Tell me Jill's not right. Please.
So my dad was always a strict one, right? So my mom always was the not so strict one, right? So back then, so take a year off. Actually, the timing worked out well. So my mom's brother from India actually was setting up a business in Dubai in UAE, right? And this was 99. This was kind of just when Dubai was starting to kind of build up at the time, right? And so he was setting up a lighting manufacturing company out there. So he's like, listen, if you're interested in getting some international exposure, come out here, spend some time, walk you through all aspects of the business. You can kind of learn it. You're in a new country.
So in your year off, you were working?
Well, I flew out to Dubai, spent some time. I wouldn't say I was working hard. I was sort of shadowing and sort of interning. But I was experiencing a new country. I was, meeting new people.
Now I'm feeling more aligned with the situation. So you did have a focus. You were just traveling around doing nothing.
Yes. Yeah.
How much money? Well, how much money did you make that year? That's the real question.
Zero.
Oh no! I just want to say right now, thank you so much to both of my children for never listening to my podcast. If you're one of my children's friends, which I know some of them do not tell them about Sashir's episode at all. And I'm really bummed this is coming out soon, because I'm going, oh, you're causing my blood pressure to come down. So you took a year off, different path, different strokes for different folks. You have this, and I've talked to you about this before, this like weird thing that happened to me when I went to India. And I've been to 73 countries. And it's like this weird, like appreciation, love, passion, understanding, compassion, expansion. I mean, maybe it's the Hinduism, maybe it's the Sikhs, maybe it's that contrast, maybe it's the abundance, maybe it's just the history, maybe it's the fact that, people emigrated from Africa to India and all civilization really came from one of those two places. I don't know what it is, but you had this passion and you needed to go to find yourself. So you
Yep.
went searching. And so how did you end up going from this round the world Dubai, which God, you must have been bored in Dubai. I can't even imagine how boring that must have been back then.
It was actually fun. There was like maybe 2-3 big hotels. There was 2 nightclubs. Now there's like hundreds of them, right? I just went in there and I just got introduced to people, and so I made some friends out there. On the business side, I was actually learning a lot. The country is obviously developing as well. And so I spent about 6 months there. And then Dubai is very close to India. So I flew out to India a couple of times, stayed with my grandparents. I was very close to my mom's dad, my grandfather in Chennai in India. So it's always nice spending time with him.
So you're listening well, you're connecting through empathy, you're learning this empowerment and all this stuff that you talked about, your definition of excellence. How did you go from this world traveler checking out India, checking out Dubai and visiting India to the founder of Episource, which was a mega business? And by the way, I had no idea Sishir's business was so big. I just thought he was a normal dude, normal business. I also, for some reason, thought you were a hired gun. And I didn't know.
Oh, really?
I don't know why that is.
I just thought you just assumed I was like this rich family business kind of guy from India.
No, because you would have had more connections in India than me. You always told me I have more connections in India than you, so I knew that wasn't the case. But how did you? I mean, you went to Accenture. Is that what happened? You went.
So I'll tell you. So what happened after that year? At the time, this is kind of 2000. Yeah, around 2000. The .com era starting to take off. And then I started reading about in Claremont, the graduate school had this 1-year course in information systems and e-commerce, right? And so I was kind of reading
graduate school after your sabbatical.
Yeah. So then I thought, I could already see the shift towards global outsourcing, software development. And I started learning that year off while traveling to India. So I thought to myself, hey, maybe there's an opportunity in leveraging India as a base to do things for US customers, right, in the software development space. And I want to learn more about it. So at the time, e-commerce, and that sort of drew me towards this degree. So took that 1-year sabbatical, applied, got in, did that for a year. And then I said, okay, I think it might be good to get a little work experience. I know I have this itch to do something on my own, start a business on my own, be an entrepreneur. But I think I do need sort of a foundation of work experience, right? And so after the 1 year, I got hired by Accenture and worked in their electronics high tech group in Los Angeles. They had staffed me on a client project in Chicago, so I got to spend a year in Chicago, which was a great experience.
So you had great grades in college too.
Yes. You
had it well above a 3.5.
Yes. I think it was like 3.8, I think.
Yeah. 3.8 at a prestigious school, because you don't get into Accenture. Yeah. You don't get, and were you doing case studies and all that to get the consulting job? Was it as hard to get back then as it is now?
No, I think then it was, you got obviously go through a bunch of interviews. I think they did like the pre-med background a little bit too. And so I think that helped, but it wasn't very intensive back then as far as like case studies and stuff like that, but maybe it is now. But while I was there, going back to that theme of global outsourcing, Accenture had already set up their own big back offices in India. They were setting up not just India, across the world, right? So that kind of got me interested more in this space. And .com rise, .com bust, right? So that came next. And that kind of timed in while I was at Accenture. I survived. They went through massive layoffs. I survived the first couple rounds of layoffs, was doing well. And then just work dried up, right? There weren't enough projects out there. And so in I think it was 2002, I was part of that final round of layoffs. So I actually got laid off from Accenture at the time. And then I'm back to square one. Okay, what do I do next? Right? I could go maybe apply to another consulting firm. Maybe I go back and get an MBA. And I thought maybe this is the time to actually, I'm young. Well, how old was I at that time? I think I was 24 at the time, 25. I still have, maybe now's the time to take risks, right? And maybe now's the time to risk. I have this entrepreneurial dream. I have connections in India, right? I want to do something global. And my grandfather, who I was very close to, had invested in a small software development company in Chennai in India. He said, hey, you got some time? Why don't you come out? We need some help marketing and selling to US customers. I also need some help building a team here, growing the team. We just have poor leadership here, right? So I thought to myself, I don't know, it just didn't sound super exciting, but I'm like, but maybe this is the start for something else that could happen there, right? And so took a leap of faith. I said, okay, I told my grandfather, okay, I'm coming out. So I spent 2 months here after the layoff.
This is where it happens.
This is where it happens.
This is where life changes, not for just you, but for me, for the better. This is when an angel comes down from heaven and touches you and then me through you, and you meet Vidya.
It all happens that
way. Thank God for India. I do, but before we get there, though, I just want to flag one thing. If you're listening in the car right now, Grandpa doesn't call up and say, start a business with me unless you've been doing things. So he could probably see that you were out searching, but you had done well in school. You had adapted well to India. You had made your mark there before. You'd gone to Dubai. You'd done the traveling. You'd put the energy into your relationships. You probably learned your empowerment from him, right? You're picking up. I just think as you're talking, I'm just thinking about how observant you must have been. And I'm also thinking about what an asshole I am to my kid. I hope he doesn't listen to this and want to go on this journey, but you're on this journey of exploring and paying attention and absorbing and finding trends and seeing the future. And you've been doing well at the things you did. Like my son's done well in college, and you did well in Accenture, even though you got laid off, wasn't your fault. The whole world blew up in 2002. And that's when a grandfather or a friend's dad or a dad says, hey, come work with me, because they have faith in you. So you go back to India, making my life, my wife's life, my children's lives better. And you go to business with Grandpa, and give us a real quick version of how you met Vidya.
Yeah. So when I was in working with my grandfather, just learning more about the lay of the land from a business perspective. And obviously with my time previously in India, when I was in middle school, elementary school there, had developed, and as I said, we kept visiting there year after year, every summer, built a lot of friendships, a lot of cousins. So I used to hang out with them socially, right? And it just so happened while at that time I was at the gym, and I see Vidya working out over there. And I'm like, I was working out with a buddy of mine. I'm like, she looks pretty hot. Like, who is she, right? They're like, Sishir, don't even try, right? She comes from a very conservative family. Don't waste your time, right? You're here, you have a good time, whatever. Like, oh, really? And so go back. And then I start asking other people, like, okay, who's this girl, Vidya? Like, I got to get to know her a little bit better, right? And I get the same feedback. Listen, you got no shot here. Don't waste your time, right? But I was kept being persistent.
There's a caste system in India. We should mention that.
I don't think it's anything with a caste system. I think it's more of North Indian, South Indian. Within North Indian, South Indians, some families are more traditional, conservative versus others. And I think in her family, it's, hey, you're kind of marrying in that same North Indian community, or you're kind of involved with people in the same North Indian community. I was South Indian, right? And let alone like a guy coming from the US, they have no idea anything about it.
Punjabi,
well, forget
right?
about it. It's Marwadi. So it's like Rajasthani, where I think you've been to Jaipur and stuff. Yeah. So their family's traditionally there.
Have I been to Jaipur? I took you to the palace. Yes. We went to the top of that palace that we hooked up in that room that nobody'd ever been to before. Remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yes,
Ramba Palace. We went there together. We love Ramba Palace. Remember
yeah, yeah.
Sanjay and his omelets and the airplane waiting for us because they were waiting for Sanjay and Charisma so we could finish our omelets in the entire commercial. Have I, the Maharaja of Rajasthan is on Sanjay's polo team. I pretty much
Yeah, yeah.
consider myself Jaipurian.
Jaipurian.
Udaipurian. Okay. I did not keep going with your story. So you're there with your grandpa, you meet this perfect human being.
Yeah. So we actually ended up at first and then I knew one of her best friends really well. And so that sort of got the introduction started. And we hung out a couple of times. We would go to the clubs every weekend. You've partied in India. They can be very fun. And so yeah, so we ended up spending a lot of time together. It was long distance, right? So I was traveling back and forth,
Oh,
India,
you
the
didn't move
US.
back to India. You
I
went
mean,
there.
I spent a lot of time there, but I would come back here because part of coming back here was trying to help my grandfather's company with some business development stuff. So I'd travel back and forth.
Okay, so hold on a second. So this is not Episource. This software company did not become Episource. So you're still exploring, you're learning, you're working with your grandpa's company. You meet your future wife, and you're in a distant relationship.
Yeah.
And so fast forward, how did that turn into Episource?
Yeah. So while I was there, I got the sense at some point this grandfather's company wasn't going anywhere, right? He invested in the wrong people, very small. And then I started thinking through back to my dad. I was talking to him and he said, okay, you didn't become a doctor, but there's still opportunities in healthcare, right? And the big pain point for us doctors is medical billing.
So there's
right?
your consulting. You're looking for the pain point.
Yes, looking for the pain point. And what can we do to make their lives better, right? And my dad was like, can we just do it better, faster, cheaper?
Okay, let's stop for a second. So if you're listening right now, and you don't know what you want to do, like maybe you're my son, maybe your dad's hounding you all the time and in your face all the time, and you're thinking, what do I want to do? You don't chase after your passions. That's a misunderstanding. You go after what you're good at. If you happen to be passionate about what you're good at, but what can you make a difference in? What are you good at? And you listen to Sishir, and he's got his values. He's good at listening well, empowering others through optimizing their strengths. He's good at connecting through empathy. He's got this background that helped him develop his confidence, his problem-solving skills. He's good at exploring. He's good at noticing. But
I think one thing, Matt, I would add to that is I think just having a natural inclination to learn and be curious.
Yeah, I would encourage for learning. Yeah, I
think every person would benefit from that, right? And that just got me. Like I was talking to my dad. Wow, tell me more. I want to learn more, right? Like,
but you've had this consulting experience where you know how to help solve problems and you know how to get in and get the team moving because you're an outside person working with the team. You've got this software experience. And then what's the next thing you do? You take all your experiences of what you're good at, maybe what you're passionate about, and you find a pain point that aligns in that stuff. You always wanted to be a doctor, kind of. So you found this pain point and you have a thirst for learning. Now keep going.
Yeah, so he said medical billing, and I was convinced. Okay, how are we going to do this out of India? So you need to train medical billers.
Back to your passion. There's your passion.
Back to medical coders, and yes, and I'm like out of India. So my dad said, while you're there, why don't you just start studying the healthcare outsourcing landscape, right? And I spent some time while I was there, and I was pleasantly surprised. There were other companies already doing this, right? So you had a pool of resources available in the market, right? People that are trained in U.S. medical billing processes, medical coding processes. So I said, my dad was like, start with my practice. I'll be your first client, right? That's always the hard part, getting your first customer, right? But here it was easy. My dad was there. He was ready to support.
Not easy.
To start with me.
He trusted you. He believed in you because you proved it.
Yeah. So I said, fine. So it got me to learn more about the business too. And that's when I hired my first employee there. I got connected to a consultant and said, hey, let's just search in the market. Chennai was like known for healthcare outsourcing, so it was a lot easier. And I interviewed like 10 candidates and I got this first guy. His name was Gopi, and he was my first employee. I said, hey, I'm trying to build a medical billing outsourcing business based in the Los Angeles area. We're going to use India as sort of an outsourcing center to make it more efficient and more cost effective, right? And so he joined in, and that's how I started. I started my dad's practice. I was working with his medical billing manager here in the LA area, and I'm just really built out processes, and this was all on my own. I was hands on. I mean, I was literally had a portable scanner in my hand. I'd collect all these documents from my dad's office,
and they're sensitive documents. This is before HIPAA, but you got to
do what you got to do when you get started, right? So you're very hands on, and so that's how Episource started. We were a medical billing company. My dad was our first client, and obviously in Southern California, we had a lot of connections with doctors who were in the practice of medicine, the business side of healthcare, whether it's owning hospitals.
Why would you have those connections?
Just, Indians, a lot of Indians practice medicine, right? So
okay.
they just happened. My dad's
just
friends.
Based on your nationality, you had some doors open. And if you're listening right now, how are your doors going to open? Maybe it's your church. Maybe it's your college that you went to. Start calling alumni. Maybe it's your nationality. Maybe it's your neighborhood. But you're an opportunistic person. So you're out there. I mean, that's what entrepreneurs do. You're just looking. While you're there in India, why don't you check out medical outsourcing? If you're an entrepreneur like Sishir is, you're constantly looking for these pain points. You're constantly looking, you're just aware. It's an awareness. So you get your first client, and then can't miss this one either. You build that process and you tighten it down before you go get the second client.
Yes.
So you don't embarrass yourself when you start leveraging all your networks, right?
Yeah. And that just led to the connections, led to more practices, more accounts, steadily hired a couple more people in India. And then I think kind of a big turning point came when...
This is like 2005.
Yes, 2005. An aunt of mine introduced me to another Indian doctor, but who owned like a large managed care organization that managed thousands of doctors, right?
This is about when I met you.
No, this is way before.
Yeah, what do we mean? 2008?
I joined YPO 2014. So I think around that time is when
moly.
Yeah. So this is like, 05, 06, meet this other doctor and I have a meeting with them. I'm just hoping he introduces me to other doctors, but he actually took a lot of interest in what I was like pitching to him. And he said, hey, I'm more than happy testing you out, and I'm going to give you connections. I also have a use case for a project that I'm struggling with. And if you can figure this out, it'd be good for you, it'd be good for me. And at the point, you always want to say yes to everything, right? Because when you say, I know now as you grow and scale a business, you don't want to say yes to everything. But in those days, you want to say yes to everything.
Because you don't know where you're going.
Exactly. And I took that challenge. I solved it for him. I put a team around it. He was happy and he was impressed. And he said, listen, two things. The fact that we're all Indian, but I like to support young Indian entrepreneurs. And I have connections and experience in the industry. I think we could be great partners together. And that was my first business partner in Episource. His name was Dr. Vinod. And so with his connections, the business started to slowly really ramp up. So we got hospital contracts. The India team was building up. And then where the company really took off, and I'm sure you've probably experienced it, Matt, I'm sure others have, there's always a pivot moment in any sort of entrepreneurial journey. And I was randomly at a conference sitting next to, it was a healthcare physician conference, and I was sitting next to an executive at a health insurance company, a health plan. And he said, hey, I hear you have this medical billing business. You got this large team in India. Do you know anything around what's called risk adjustment medical coding for health plans? And I said, no, I have no idea. Again, going back to saying yes to whatever you can get your hands on. And he said, hey, I'm going to give you 1,000 medical records. I want you to code and abstract data. We will train you, give you the rules and guidelines. Are you willing to do it? But you can't charge me anything for it. I said, sure, I'm going to do it. And
why can't you charge him?
At the time, it was kind of like, hey, at that time, no one was doing this scope of work offshore on an outsourced basis, right? So he's like, I'm just going to give you 1,000 records. I want to see if you guys can do this for me. And
you're scanning it for what?
So basically, we are scanning a medical record. We're capturing clinical diagnosis codes on these patients. And what we're doing is we're building an accurate health risk profile on that patient. So a patient could have diabetes with a renal complication, right? But the doctor, for whatever reason, just submits their claim with diabetes with no renal complication there. So what the government says is if the medical record has documentation for diabetes with the complication, you can get credit for it and get reimbursed for it. So it became a revenue optimization sort of exercise for these health insurers. So that was the scope of work. But his pain point was we just need to do this at scale and cheap and more cost effective.
And
right?
they have a person sitting in an office scanning it manually, and
Yes,
you have
yes.
AI technology over.
Well, at the time we did have. At the time we had no AI.
But you got a
technology.
software background. You got a software background, so
Yeah.
soon you do.
Yeah. So so that was a pivot moment. So then we did really well on those charts, got more business, more volume. And that's where me and my partner were like, hey, there's a big opportunity here, right? And the medical billing business was doing well, but managing doctors was a pain in the ass. It was hard. It was very difficult. And we said, why not focus all our attention here with corporations like these large health plans? And it's a niche area. It's growing. No one is doing this on an outsourced global kind of delivery model. And let's try to capture the market here. And so that was when we shut down the medical billing business and pivoted everything towards this risk adjustment coding services for health plans. And that's kind of where advice is. Sometimes you're going to have these pivot moments in business. You just got to recognize where the opportunity is, right? And sometimes you just may have to make a hard decision. You may have to give up on certain things that you were doing in the past, may have been working, but here's where the industry is headed, right? And that's where you need to go. And that's the decision we took. And that just changed the whole trajectory of the company.
Well, I mean, that's such a cool way of clarifying the entrepreneurial journey. And people screw it up. You're saying yes to everything. You're saying yes to everything, trying different things out, looking to see what clicks. And you've got something going and you're saying yes to everything. Eventually, you have to stop saying yes to everything and pick a focus and develop a core competency. And in your case, boom, we're focusing on something else. And
yeah,
so it could have been, we're going to stop doing all this other stuff and focus on medical billing. You know, that doesn't sell for the multiples that your business did because you had different competition. There was less of an opportunity. So the entrepreneur has to say yes to everything until the entrepreneurial gene kicks in and says, stop saying yes. And the entrepreneur, you've got this experience, you've got these skill sets, you've got these strengths, you've got this worldly knowledge to be able to go, that's the one. And you pick the right one. And that's where your story could have gone differently. I still think you would have ended up in India, but you could have picked the wrong one and you picked the right one. What year was that?
This was 2008.
Wow. So it wasn't super fast growth after 2008. Super fast growth didn't happen till like 2019, right?
No, I think like 2015, 2016. And it goes back to, we could have grown very fast, maybe taken outside capital, but we always had a mindset of a bootstrap mentality, right? Let's kind of grow. If business was generating positive cash flow, let's continue reinvesting it back in the business, and be very disciplined, right? Be very disciplined on managing your costs and expenses. And so we kind of, and around the same time, my partner's son-in-law, was in the finance, investment banking world. He was looking to do something entrepreneurial as well. So we got introduced, and, I was basically doing everything myself, right? I was, sales, business development, tax, software. So my other partner was more of an advisor in the business who said, it may be worth meeting. I know he's my son-in-law, there could be some things there, but he's smart. I think you guys could work very well together. And then going back to being humble, the humility part, like it could have been very easy for me to be selfish, to be like, no, this is my thing. Like I want to be in control. I'm going to do this on my own. There's two family members, there was a little insecurity, right? Because you got two family members.
Yeah, that's a risky deal.
It's a risk, right?
And did they have equal shares to you?
So we, prior to him joining us 50-50, and then it ended up being 40, me 40 and him 20, but together, the both of them were 60, right? And it was me 40. So I was a minority, right? And as a family, as we consider the families being together, and everyone told me, Sishir, don't do this, right? Don't do this because you're putting yourself in a very risky position here. But I just went with the faith that in trust, right? I really believed that his son-in-law and I could work really well together. And going back to optimizing your strengths, right? So he came with the finance, investment banking, operational experience. I had no finance experience, right?
Wow.
And where
but you
my
never
strengths
took outside money though, right?
We did.
So you needed his finance experience for just structuring notes.
I think just
and
internally,
loans.
yeah. No, I think just internally in the company, just building financial discipline, financial processes. And he had a lot of operational experience. He had some experience with India as well. So that came in handy. And I was more customer focused, sales, marketing, business development, and strategy. And so I think we complemented each other really well. And at that point, we became co-CEOs. And and then I think we worked really well together. No egos, full trust. And that really worked. And that kind of helped propel us to really grow faster. I think if it was just me, it would have been hard. I could have hired certain people, but we really worked really well together. And I think if you can remove the egos out of the equation, partnerships can work really well. In our case, it did work really well. I know sometimes it doesn't work for everyone, but I think it goes back to just recognizing what we're all good at and staying in your lanes, right? I think that was a key thing. So yeah, business grew well, bootstrapped it, never took any outside capital. And it got to a point where we were in 21 approaching 200 million in revenue, strong EBITDA, right? We were like 70 million of EBITDA. So it was became a big business. And we were like, maybe now's the time to explore bringing on a capital partner, right? And you think about how do we grow the platform bigger? Think about strategic M&A, stuff like that. So hired a bank. We hired JP Morgan. This is the end of 21 and said, hey, let's go on this path, explore options. We still loved the business. We wanted to be active in the business. We had a lot of private equity interests prior to that. One thing I'd always encourage, like, even if you're not ready to sell, and it's always good to build relationships in the investment community, right? So even prior to that, we were networking with all PE funds. They were tracking our business. We made sure that we were on their radar. And that helped. I think it helped during the process. We got more people involved. And it ended up being UnitedHealth Group was one of our biggest customers. And they said, hey, we want to participate in this process. And they came in, kind of put an aggressive bid at the end and said, hey, we want to acquire the whole business. We think there are a lot of synergies here. And at that point, we told ourselves, that would mean things go in a different direction, right? Because if you're selling to a strategic, most likely we're not going to be there for the long haul, right? Private equity, we're going to do a role, we're going to be involved. And we just took the call. Maybe it's time to actually exit the business in full, right? Maybe it's the best thing for the company. And keep in mind, the markets were choppy in 22, right? It's capital markets were wonky, cost of capital was high.
COVID,
it's not like
remember that?
To COVID. Yeah. So I think at that point we said, and you'll find in certain industries are more regulated than others. And as you know, US healthcare is a very regulated industry, dealing with government entities. There's a lot of risks, right? There's policies that were changing in our space. We said to de-risk, maybe this was the better option. So that's kind of where we decided to move forward with UnitedHealth Group. And of course, it's a great story, right? You start something very small from nothing. I started off, our first office was my grandfather's, one of his houses, right? You start off there, and then you grow and scale a business. So today it's over 10,000 employees worldwide, 9,000 in India, over 1,000 in the US. We had partnerships in the Philippines. I think when you think about global, it wasn't just India. It's like, where can you tap talent with the right skill sets, right? And so India is very good for analytical, process-driven work. You got the Philippines, very customer-centric focus. So anything that dealt with any voice-based processes, whether it's customer support, scheduling, those kind of functions, would be outsourced to the Philippines. So, I'm just very proud, right? It's a great story. You kind of build something from nothing. You sell it to UnitedHealth Group, one of the largest health companies in the world, certainly the largest in the US. And they had asked me, my partner, hey, what do you guys want to do? Right. And I think at that point, I'd been in the business for 18 years. I think it was time to maybe step into something, doing something different. I always had a philanthropic sort of focus throughout life. I think maybe my experience in India exposed me to a lot of things and always wanted to kind of give and help. And it got me thinking not just globally, it's also how do you think more locally too, right? It's not about trying to solve every problem around the world. It's like, why not start within your own community, right? And whether it's Orange County, right? And so it got me passionate about things like education, obviously healthcare. Those are kind of the two areas I'm really focused on. And I said, why not kind of transition out and start focusing there? And maybe another business opportunity might come along the way, right? But take some time. During my time in the business, I didn't spend a lot of time with my family. I made a lot of sacrifices there for the better of the business, but sacrificed spending time with Vidya and the kids. So this is an opportunity to travel, spend time with them, and it's been great. It's been a year. I told them, hey, I'll help it any way I can. And so I was on a consulting arrangement for 2 months and transitioned out. And yeah, that's where I am today. Yeah.
Now you're in the process of really figuring out what's next because it's so fresh. I mean, there's just no way you even know, right?
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing. Day one, after I was fully transitioned out, there was a period of 1 month where I was lost. I felt emptiness.
I talked to you about it at the time.
Yeah. And I talked to Joe John. Other people have exited business.
Yeah, I know. Right? I think I said, talk to Joe John because he wrote a book about it.
Yeah. And he said, whatever you're feeling is real, right? You're going to feel this was your baby. This is something that you started. You feel a connection. It's gone, right? And so there's this feeling of emptiness and not being wanted, right? And not feeling connected.
Yeah,
and
you gave up your baby.
Yeah. So that was hard. Month one was hard. I think month two is you start forcing yourself to try to get into something, right? And then I was like, I got to get into something. And you get thrown so many business ideas come your way and you pick stupid shit. You think like, why am I doing this? Right. Like I was telling Vidya, like she loves fashion, beauty problem, whatever. Right. And I was like, hey, why don't we like India? Why not find a beauty brand in India that we can market in the US, right? Like I can work with you, do something with you. It's like, okay, here's a brand I think might work. And I was trying to trace that. And then I was pressing with her and she's like, wait a minute. Like, are you doing this for me or are you doing this for yourself? Because I'm not looking to get hands-on involved in any business right now. And then it got me thinking like, wow, I'm actually really not interested in this. I'm just trying to get into something to fill that void, right? And that's when I said, okay, now it's only been 2 months. Take some time, pause, reflect, and take some time off, genuine time off. And that's when I said, hey, I'm going to prioritize family. I'm going to put all these other projects on the side, do some investing on the side. And that's been what I've been focused on right now. And it's been great. I actually feel a lot better, patience, better headspace. And now I'm at a point where I can start exploring and doing other things. And I still don't know quite yet what I want to do, but I do want to focus on the philanthropy side. There's some organizations I'm working with. And then the business side, I like in this next phase of life being kind of that mentor advisor kind of role, right? I don't think me being an operator, starting something from scratch is something I want to do again. But can I advise and mentor a startup, or it could be a company that's growing, whether it's lending capital, but being on the board, lending strategic advice and expertise, given my experience, both international, local, obviously a lot of technology, AI experience as well. So I feel like I'm in a good place now. I'm excited what the next chapter is going to bring.
Wow. Well, so am I. And Sishir, we went way over. I wanted to ask.
I can spend hours with you.
No, I know. What I really wanted to talk to you about is why do people love you so much? And see if we can we're going to have to do a whole different episode on how to treat people so nicely that everybody around you loves you. But we're not going to do that. We're going to cut it off right here. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an interesting year, we'll say. I'm sure it's been tough. It's just such a strange thing to let go of your baby. Thank you for making time and sharing all that. That was fascinating for me. And I know you pretty damn well. I can't believe I've only known you for 10 years. Thanks for making time and being on the edge of excellence.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks, Matt.